You are listening to Dialogues for Our Futures, a podcast from Hanaholmen, the Cultural Centre for Sweden and Finland. Today's episode, what can the Nordic countries learn from Africa?
Ingredients of happiness or good life is the simple fact that I feel small. I feel that there are so many more things that are greater than me. There is the massive ocean thundering day and night, and I wake up in the middle of the night and I think of the Mami Wata, the goddess of the ocean that is in the Vodun religion locally, and she's present there. And then I think about, the nature around me and how much I need the ecosystem, and I'm part of it, and I'm not self-sufficient like I'm in Finland. Then I go to work and I meet my colleagues and people call me by name, and I feel seen, and we laugh, and there's a sense of, again, something bigger than me, the community.
Today's guests are Julia Ojanen, director of Villa Karo, a Finnish West African cultural institute, Marcia Harvey Isaksson, a Stockholm-based artist and founder of Southnord. The discussion is moderated by Sonja Lindfors, a Finnish Cameroonian choreographer and the artistic director of Urban Apa, a community for culture, arts and events.
Thank you for joining us today. And I wanted to start with just like a very short round of introductions, so maybe you can tell a tiny bit more about yourself, what are you currently busy with, but then you will have more time to elaborate on your organization's work later.
So my name, as you said, is Marcia Harvey Isaksson, and I live in Stockholm. I've lived there for 26 years, but I am born and raised in Zimbabwe, in Harare, the capital. But I like to say that I'm Southern African because I have a very rich Southern African heritage. I have South African blood on my father's side. He was born in South Africa. I have a Mozambican blood on my grandmother's side. I have the Zambian blood on the other side. So I see myself as this, real Southern African girl who is a testament to how people moved around and intermingled and met each other. I have two children that are Swedish and have Swedish heritage. Their father is Swedish, so they have this duality of their Africanness and their Swedishness. And so this is also influencing how I think in this place. When I say this place, I mean this region, because even though it was a choice to move to Sweden, now I almost have no choice because I have set deep roots in the soil. So I can move away, but I will always have roots there because my children have roots there. So a little short about me.
Thank you. Julia, would you like to continue?
Sure. My name is Julia Ojanen. I grew up in the middle of a deep, dark forest in the countryside of Finland, southern Finland. And as long as I can remember, I've always dreamt of other places. And I always longed to travel and see the world and experience different realities. And I always geared myself towards the international. Since I was 15, I always spent my summers abroad, and I'm actually today I'm a recovering development worker. So I spent years of my life in Africa and Asia, working in development cooperation, and then I just realized I came to an end of my path in that sector for various reasons. But always having been a lover of art and culture, I then felt the call of choosing again a new path in life, and now I feel really privileged to be able to combine my experience from leadership in NGOs and organizations, as well as the international experience from various other countries in East Africa. I have lived in Malawi, for instance, a couple of years, and now then combining that with the possibility to enable work for artists and scientists. So yeah.
Thank you.
Great to be here today.
Julia. That's really interesting. Thank you. I wanted to now dive immediately into this notion of good life, which kind of like brings so many things into my mind. And like, I think good life or happiness are actually like really important topics to kind of conversate about, because they like direct our lives so much. So I chose maybe this profession or this education because I thought this will lead me to good life. Finland has been ranked the happiest country in the world 8 times in a row. This always surprises me, but this is, again, a fact. So according to the World Happiness Report, we are the happiest country in the world. So welcome to the happiest country in the world. And in the study, the respondents evaluated their own quality of life through factors such as economic well-being, social support, freedom to make choices, low level of corruption, as well as many other factors. So kind of like in this report, these are the factors that kind of like, or good life consists of these factors. But Julia, I wanted to like ask you immediately, what is good life for you? What do you consider good life? And maybe also like from this Finnish perspective, what kind of cultural norms good life would you recognize here in the Finnish context?
Maybe just to start from the second question about cultural norms in Finnish context, I think to many of us it's a lot about contentment, tyytyväisyys, rather than the intense emotion of happiness. And in fact, I spoke with a professor who came to residence in Villa Karo, who is a researcher of the World Happiness Report. And he said actually that the questions are formulated in the study for the Finnish audience in that way. How happy, how content are you with your life, rather than what is your happiness level. So yeah, I think it's about, fulfilling your needs. Obviously, your basic needs need to be fulfilled, but then some kind of sense of connectedness. At least for me, that makes good life, connected to nature, like we see here in Hanasaari around us. Our summer place is super important for me, my family. I can't wait to go and discover how she is still. I call it, I feel that our summer place is almost like a person, like a member of the family. And I'm already imagining how she will shake off the dry leaves of her hair and be a bit sleepy still in the spring. And I will, the urinification every spring is fantastic. So yeah, connectedness with nature, but also connectedness to other people.
Yeah.
Family, friends. I read the responses that you all provided, and those are the things that came out. Family, friends, love, and then balance between work and free time and well-being, and also being challenged. Those were the elements that came up in most of the responses. Yeah.
Exactly. Marcia, how about you? What is good life from a Zimbabwean or a Southern African perspective? And I'm also really interested, like, you like now living in Sweden, like what are like the challenges or the differences maybe in the notion of good life when it comes to the Swedish context?
Yeah, it's interesting because I lived half my life in Zimbabwe. I actually live more than half my life in Sweden now. And so maybe my notions have shifted a bit, but at the core of it, it's the simple feeling of wanting to have family, community, friends. I love your description of the country house, because my husband's family, there's a country house that we go to all the time, and that was the first place I went to. And even though we've moved apartments, this is and I always greet the home when I get there, like, hello Brento, how are you? Exactly. We're back, and exactly. I didn't know that I enjoyed the Nordic nature or nature in general so much, because you take it for granted. I grew up in a city. We had a garden, but I was out in the garden playing, but it was just things that were there. And now suddenly the forest, the Swedish forest or Finnish forest, very important to me when I come out. But so these like simple values have followed me all through life. But when I moved to Sweden, I have to say that it was very challenging to, as an adult, come to a new country. And even though I had a job, I came, as an accountant, and I moved with my profession. I didn't have the struggle of many immigrants who have a profession, but they are relegated to working with something else that they overqualified for. I came into the same profession I had in Zimbabwe, but I met this language barrier that's more difficult than you think, and you realize that your language and culture and cultural understanding is such a link to your happiness. I went into deep depression for 6 months because I could not communicate. I couldn't. And then when I started to learn Swedish, I was very diligent. For a whole year, I went to Folkuniversitetet and did my Swedish course, and from basic to business Swedish. But I realized even when I started to try and speak the language that I had lost my personality. I became a new person. I had to shift into a new person. How do you joke in Swedish? How do you joking and laughing, that's part of good life. And if you're in a conversation where people are talking a little faster, and you can't catch up, or you catch the joke, but a little bit later you start laughing and everyone else is already moved on. So that was a challenge. And I think this idea that immigrants must assimilate into the Swedish society or the Finnish society. You need to learn the language. And now I think I have a friend from Zimbabwe who's going through this immigration process in Sweden, and they actually have it as a demand now. Show us your Swedish course. Credits. And so that force of you can come here as long as you become like us, and there's no embracing of the diversity that we come with, like our languages and our culture and our mannerisms. And if you laugh too loud in a public space, people turn their heads you're disturbing the peace, even though it's maybe so your personality changes, and then what does that do when you don't know yourself anymore in creating good life? But on the other hand, I have to say that because I had my children in Sweden, you get a year's maternity leave, unheard of in Zimbabwe. You had 3 months. But on the other hand, you had support, you had family. So your first child, you move back to your mother's home and you're taken care of before, during and after. And there's a whole another process of taking care of. So I think those challenges of trying to find community, you have to work a bit harder because I came alone. I didn't come with my family. So you have to work harder to find your people. And even though my husband has family, they come from Stockholm, it's not that you can just pass by and, hey, how you doing? No, you got to book a time 2 weeks in advance. You can't just... So all that's spontaneous, just hanging out and coming to sit next to each other. It didn't come naturally until I almost had to teach people where I come from, this is what we do. So can I do with you? But then the weird thing is that you start to assimilate so much that when you get back home, you start thinking why are you pitching up at my house without telling me you're coming? You begin to be irritated by the things that you loved. So it's a real conundrum, actually, to be honest.
So what I'm kind of hearing is that nature is important, community is important, people are important, and then having the possibility for humor and connection through language. But then as we're now talking about what could we in the Nordics also learn from different knowledges, African knowledges as well, what really comes, at least for me, is this lack of community in many places, but then also that it is so hard to come into the Finnish context or Swedish context as an outsider. I've had this conversation with foreign friends several times that they move here to Finland and they're asking why doesn't anybody invite me to their house? What's wrong with me? How do I find new friends? And I think we've had this conversation sometimes that at least Finnish people tend to be respectful. I don't want to bother your peace. Whereas actually And maybe like I'm thinking about kind of like my Cameroonian side. People want to be bothered. People want you to ask how you're doing. Hey, like let's have a chat. How's your family? How's your kid? How's your dog? How's your all of this?
Right.
Is there something that you kind of like recognize or something else that has been then frictionless? You also talked about kind of like the traditional Finnish values and then maybe the alternative good life. Julia, is there something else that you want to kind of like expand on that idea?
Well, when I talk about the African continent, for me now, I'm talking about Benin and particularly the small village of Grand Popo on the Atlantic coast there in Benin, where Villa Karo is located. And there, what I have discovered in terms of ingredients of happiness or good life is the simple fact that I feel small. I feel that there are so many more things that are greater than me. There is the massive ocean thundering day and night, and I wake up in the middle of the night and I think of the Mamiwata, the goddess of the ocean that is in the Vodun religion locally, and she's present there. And then I think about, the nature around me and how much I need the ecosystem, and I'm part of it, and I'm not self-sufficient like I'm in Finland. Then I go to work and I meet my colleagues, and people call me by name, and I feel seen, and we laugh, and there's a sense of, again, something bigger than me, the community. The sense of being small makes me more grateful, which makes me more happy. So the nature, the invisible world of the spirits, and also the people, sense of community. That's something I'm taking back whenever I come back to Finland. I have a reverse culture shock, and I'm like, I'm so anonymous here. Helsinki feels so anonymous for me. So I may be a village girl deep down in my heart.
One thing that struck me, I lost my mother recently, and I was down in Zimbabwe for the funeral, was that, and I always found this a bit weird with like when my husband's grandmother died, and it took months to have the funeral because nobody had time in the calendar, and so she was in the morgue for months. I was like, what is going on? And yet, like in Zimbabwe, you're buried within maybe a week at the most. And depending on where people are, now people are spread all over the world. We're scattered, in the wind. So they'll wait for people to fly home before, and that's actually the holdup. Like, when can everyone gather? But what really struck me, and it was such a beautiful feeling, was like my father passed away a while, like 10 years old, 2011. So this was my last parent, and I was like, on the way there, I was like, I'm motherless. I'm child. What do you call it? I'm an orphan. I'm an orphan. But when I got there, all my aunties were there, my mother's sisters, every single one, and all my cousins, like my female cousins, were there. And it was just like this one big, giant group and troop that we moved around, and we're like, we need to go buy the fabric, we need to go buy flowers. And you're not allowed to mourn alone. Like, and everyone gears up, and like they'll know that we contribute to, financially, whatever you have. If you've got €1, if you've got 100 euros, it's called chema. We contribute chema to the funeral, and everybody knows, like, there's food that needs to be cooked. People will be gathering for days, sleeping at your house, so you don't have to worry about it. I walked into my mother's house, which is now empty. I don't have to worry about what are people eating. It was just fixed. Somebody put a fire outside because the stove is too small. So, and so that contrast for me, I was like, wow, even in the morning, and then when you're mourning, there's like laughter. The ladies by the fire, they're like laughing. There's like people who are in charge of keeping your mood up as well, and checking in on you and how are you doing and making sure you eat. So the difference in mourning, which is like one of these rituals or rites in life where you kind of see the fabric of the society and how it actually works, that for me is like a huge contrast still that I can't get used to, and like there was a scandal in Sweden a couple of years ago. I don't know if you heard about it, like these kid who was at his friend's house playing, and then the family decided that it was dinner time, so they made him stay in a room, and then they ate, and then he came back, and I was like,
I think we can do a show of hands of how many people here have experienced that in their childhood.
For me, it's unbelievable and unthinkable, because if there's a child in the house, Everybody eats. And my grandmother used to, she was a farmer and a chief's wife, so she would have the biggest pot of sadza porridge, like pap, the standard meal. It would boil for a long time until you know, like, okay, do we need to add more water so we make more? Or is this like the crowd that's here? Okay, the crowd's here, and then you make that. So that kind of difference in how we share food, how we share this like experience with strangers, with neighbors, with friends. It's different.
Actually, about the point of eating, that topic, my Beninese friends always say that you Finnish people, you always ask us if we want to eat. Of course we say no. You just bring the food. I mean, you have to be generous and hospitable. You don't ask your guests if they want to eat. Like
you just put the food
you just
there,
put
right?
the food there and say, let's eat. And that's the way to invite the people. So it's hard to unlearn, though, when you're...
But again, I think it's so like interesting because also like our family also has Karelian heritage. So then I think in the Karelian side, it has been like there's a lot of this like take, like, take food. Like there's always like this take more. Everybody take food. So then again, like there are also kind of like a lot of different kind of like cultures inside the Finnish context, inside the Nordic context. But then again, it's just interesting that now living in Helsinki, like I really lack these traditions or processes of caretaking and support when something happens to you, when you're like you divorce, like you lose somebody, like this happens, like, but also of celebration, like hey, you got something great happened to you, you got an exhibition, like let's celebrate together. And I'm always kind of like thinking again, like from my position as an artistic director, like how can we implement that into, you were talking about kind of like the DNA of the institution, or how can we change culture? How can we learn new things or remember things in the Finnish past and the Nordic past that we have forgotten? I want to kind of like move on with the conversation to Nordic exceptionalism, because I think this is again something that is just really important to keep in mind when we talk about Africa as a continent. There's so many kind of like negative stereotypes that come to your mind. But then when we talk about Nordics in the world, it's like, oh, it's like a paradise. Everything is just amazing. So, and then there is actually like this notion called Nordic exceptionalism, which refers to the perception that the Nordic countries possess unique societal characteristics that distinguish them from other nations, particularly in areas of happiness, governance, and social equality. And I think sometimes we kind of like that there's this discrepancy that at the same time I feel, at least even I have somehow swallowed that idea that, hey, yeah, like the Nordics is really great, but at the same time also there's a lot of challenges. So, for example, even though Finland has been ranked the happiest country in the world, there is so many people that are not doing well. Poverty is on the rise. Mental health issues are the second leading cause of sick leave in Finland. Young people feel lonelier and psychologically more distressed than ever. So all of these are kind of like statistics that we have from like the society right now. And I think there's a really interesting quote by Frank Martela, who's a philosopher and happiness researcher here based in Finland. And he says, Finland excels in creating the conditions for a good life, but that doesn't guarantee people feel good. So kind of, again, like this discrepancy, maybe coming back to, Julia, what you were saying, that maybe this is not a happiness report, but a report about are people content enough? And then this brings to my mind that maybe we aren't like ambitious enough about our desire for like good or celebratory or like happy life, like really this like joie de vivre.
Right.
But yeah, so I wanted to kind of like dig deeper into this. Like, how does this sound, like this notion of Nordic exceptionalism? Is this something that you, for example, recognize, Marcia, in the Swedish context?
Oh, for sure. I think Swedes think they're extra and special and are peacemakers and have done so much good in the world. And the quality of life there is fantastic. And there are many things I can attest to. And like, yes, for sure. But I think that also creates a situation where when things happen, like things are happening in Sweden right now with bombings and shootings, they don't know what to do because it's a surprise. It's like, wait, what is this happening in our country? Like, how can this happen? This is a great place. And so there's this kind of naivete around reality, kind of that discrepancy between what's actually happening on the ground and what is in the minds of people. And also we have to remember that there has been a great shift, even for just the 26 years I've been living in Sweden. I think when I moved, the Social Democrats were still in power. And then slowly we've been gliding to the right. And now, the one of the biggest parties in Sweden is very far right. So just even for me to watch that glide, and I think people, especially of my generation who grew up in the 70s, 80s, they have an image of themselves that is no longer really true in the real world. And so to calibrate that, like, where are we now, and what is it to be Swedish, and and just thinking in terms of like sports, people who excel in sports, Zlatan, Ibrahimovic, it's like, we will claim you and your Swedishness as long as you're doing like the exceptional things, and the minute you're like not, then you're not Swedish enough. Your name is not Swedish enough. You don't speak Swedish well enough. So there is this discrepancy in the self-image of what is Swedishness and what is actually the reality of it. And also to realize that, wait a minute, there are Swedes who are not like normative in their shape and face. And so even for me, like, I have a Swedish passport, but it's very difficult for me to say I am Swedish because I am African, I'm Southern African, and that's what I grew up with. But when I travel, like I did a project where I was co-curating, and it was one curator from Norway and one from Denmark, and then they were like, and our Swedish curators, and I was like, wait, what? No, that's me. I'm the Swedish curator. And that's when I'm away. And we were also visiting, where were we? In Zambia. I did a residency in Lusaka, and we gate crashed the ambassador's residence just to go to the Lucia, because I was like, I love Lucia songs. I need to. So the Swedish identity, and like, it's weird how it infiltrates you. But I don't know if I answered the question. I just went off on a rant.
But I think there's something really also painful in that self-image of Nordic exceptionalism. Like, we had the same incident. Like, we had the first Black Lucia ever here in the Finnish context. It's this young Black girl. And then she received this ton and ton of horrible racist and hate mail, because people could not get over it that you can be Finnish and you can even be Lucia, which is kind of like the epitome of whiteness and all these traditions. And then that person could actually be a young Black girl. So I think that there's really something that is kind of like really painful about the reality that the Nordics are changing. Finland is changing, Sweden is changing, Denmark is changing, Norway. All the countries are changing, like they're diversifying. They have always been diverse. We have had Sami people before we had a country called Finland. There has been Sami people living. And like now Finland is colonizing the Sami like lands. There's been Romani people. Like, we've had all like these minorities within like this region living for hundreds of years. And yet kind of like this notion of Nordic exceptionalism, or maybe our self-image as Nordic, is still excluding a lot of our kind of like inner diversity and the minorities. Go ahead.
Pick up on that from the perspective of the work we do in Villa Karo for cultural exchange and cross-cultural understanding, dialogue and learning. It's extremely stifling to have this sort of certain smugness about what a perfect country we are, a model country for everybody. And then having to go with that to somebody else's, territory. This is crazy idea. Last year, after 24 years of existence, we became an institute, a Finnish Cultural and Science Institute. And I just woke up one morning and I realized that I'm now expected to be exporting Finland. And I realized that this is not at all what I want to do, to be kind of concerned about the country image of Finland out in West Africa. No, what we want to do is to bring together people for dialogue and create something even better together. Yeah. And I just find it so narrow-minded that the kind of exporting culture should be the guiding force of what institutes abroad do, because it's really so narrow, and it doesn't give space for the humility that you need to have in order to actually co-create something useful.
Right, exactly. And I think you're really onto something there, because I see how, like, growing up, we had a lot of NGOs in Zimbabwe, and Sweden was very much present through SIDA. Danida was there a little bit, but I think the Norwegians went more to Zambia. So, I mean, we had this presence of expats that would never really enter the society. They were kind of like apart, and it wasn't about, how do you do things here? It was more, this is a great way of doing things, and this is what you should implement. And if we're going to give you money for your project, whatever it is, cultural or technological or whatever, then you have to comply with certain conditions that are approved by us. So there's this danger when you have such an amazing self-image and you go out into the world and meet other people that you cannot even understand that these are human beings with their own agency and their own self-image, and that you have to meet on a common ground. And how do you create that fertile ground for conversation? Exactly. Like you call it an eye level, eye to eye conversation, right? Yeah. Where one is not looking
down upon
the other.
Yeah. Yes. But again, I think this is so interesting because it's so complicated. Like, we have this exceptionalism, but at the same time we have this kind of like norm or like that's Finnish, or we think that Finnish people have low self-esteem, that when we travel in the world we're like, sorry, anteeksi. But at the same time there's kind of like this, like that this is like Finland and our wars and our veterans and Markka and like that there's also kind of that. So it is like highly complex.
This is so interesting. In Swedish there's a term called lagom.
Yeah.
Like
sopiva,
mellanmjölk, everything. Yes. So it's like there is that, but then there's like nobody stick out. Like don't think you anything here. Don't precis, jantelagen. Du är inte bättre än någon annan. So there's like this there's this tension all the time, and again it's about the self-image reality versus these perceptions that and then these things that are created, and they were created at some point when the nation was being built, right?
Yeah.
It had to be built and everyone had to like sign up for this. And so we have our folkdräkt, we have rikssvenska, we have, all these things that then are imposed on everybody else. And I was what do you call it? Opponent for a master's student just a couple of days ago. And she comes from Dalarna, the north of Dalarna. And she spoke, and they were calling it a dialect. I couldn't understand it. Älvdalska, which really it's a different language. It has different letters. It has different words. Wow. You don't understand it. But in Sweden, it's not classified as a language. It's classified as a dialect. And they are trying to get it recognized as a language and get minority language status and protection. But for me, I hadn't heard about Älvdalska, so I was like, what? Wait. And this is not so far from... So there's this interest in, like, again, assimilating everyone. We need to make it the same. So we know your friend, your foe, you're different, we're the same. So there's something in that that's very dangerous.
Let's kind of like bring this conversation or you're already bringing it to the field of art and culture, because again, Finland, for example, is a very young country. Very young country. We got our independence in 1917. And Finland, as we know it right now, is very much a cultural product. So kind of created by artists and makers, that we had all these different, you could call them tribes, that karjalaiset, hämäläiset. We had all these different kind of cultural heritages, but then with the independence and after the war, the civil war, and after the war with Russia, there was a really kind of heavy impetus to kind of create a one unified Finnishness. And artists have contributed to that. So again, there's a lot of power and responsibility in stories and narratives. Words create worlds and stories create worlds. So then when I hear you saying now you that as an institute, basically you are exporting Finnish culture. Again,
we are not. We don't want
no. But again, what is Finnish culture? And I think there's been so much kind of fear mongering towards Black people, brown people, especially Black and brown youth in Sweden, for example. And actually these are problems that are caused by segregation. They're not problems that are caused by the kids, but by segregation. But there's kind of this, so I think this kind of rhetoric of hey, you need to assimilate, you need to be like the regular white Finnish or Swedish or Norwegian. This has gotten stronger and stronger. Yeah. And I think that's really kind of scary. But I'm kind of I want to circle back, how do you feel this kind of conversation is taking place, or what kind of conversations about these topics are taking place in the art and cultural field?
So yeah, there's so much in what you said that I recognize and think about a lot, because I'm very often the only Black person in a room. And for a long time, I didn't even think about it. I was just yeah, there are not that many Black people. But like you say, if you're on the street, oh, wow, how come we so many right here, right now, or brown people or whatever it is. So in certain spaces, an abundance. In other spaces, a rarity. So, and that is quite a tricky thing to position to be in when you are the only one in the room, because you start thinking why am I alone? How can I bring others in? How do I open the doors? And how can I wait? And so starting Southnord is one of those things, and talking about this negative narrative that especially has been put on the young Black and brown kids, boys especially, and I have two. So I'm no, that is not my kids. It's a handful of kids who are shouting for help. This is a problem, a societal problem, and they're not getting the help they need. And it's not everyone, so you can't profile everyone. My son worked in a restaurant, so he worked late shifts. On the way home, he would be profiled by the police. Where are you going? What are you doing out here? And he was I'm going home. I am coming from work. I have worked and paid taxes and I'm going home to sleep. What is the problem? Just because I'm brown, just because I'm tall, just because I'm wearing a certain whatever. So this prompted me to say, how do we change the narrative? And the only tools I had really was the field that I was in, which was culture and art and producing. So I decided and thought that's the way, because there is a power in that space of making culture and making art, right, and offering it up to others to think with, and so even for myself, because you have to understand that I grew up in a colonized country, so I am internally colonized. So we didn't learn Zimbabwean history so much, African, Southern African. We didn't know the names of our great chiefs or the names of the great nations that existed prior or anything. But we could quote Shakespeare. We could quote, whoever, Bronte. And so this is and we knew every capital of every city in Europe, but not in Africa. If you ask me today, I don't know all the capitals of the countries in Africa. I can't. But Europe, maybe I could even give it a go. So this is a problem because it's in here. And so when you are being taught art history and like, these are our great painters, you'd never see anybody else, which is why like exhibitions like When We See Us, that's in Brussels right now, coming to Stockholm soon. I'm glad it's coming to the Nordic region. So come to Stockholm, everybody. You see people who are painted in many different ways and many different techniques, but there is a representation. This is how we see ourselves, and it's so important. And but one thing I was going to say is that I've been practicing because I get invited to like the university or the art academy, like when they're choosing
the entrance exam.
Entrance, yeah. So you're looking at portfolios, and the minute you get something from a place where it's a different aesthetic, from Asia, say, or from Africa, and it's nothing that you're used to seeing, and you start comparing it, like we have to check ourselves in that room and say, like, are we being prejudiced, and from which position are we looking at, and what qualities are we looking at? And just because somebody's been taught in one way or has a certain so there is definitely a challenge in seeing and understanding and learning other aesthetics.
Yeah.
And you can only do that by traveling and by meeting and being immersed in a place, and residencies are so important for that. Like, going to Lusaka, for example, that I did, and meeting artists and seeing the works that they're making in that context, and understanding that, wow, this is actually really quite different, but there's so many interesting aspects to it.
And that's why I'm so excited to be working with you, because we would like to create with Marcia a space in Villa Karo for Afro-Nordic artists to work together with the West African artists, all at the same time. But let's see if we can find the funding for that.
Yeah, anybody with money out there, throw it at us. We need it.
Yeah. I'm kind of like, Julia, I want to ask you, because you've lived in Malawi, but then also now with Villa Karo in Benin. What could the Finnish art field learn kind of from the cultural values that you were already kind of like talking about, the spirituality, Mambiwata, all of this? What would you like to bring to the Finnish art or cultural field from that?
It's a huge question, obviously. An art field is not one field. It's so diverse and contains, already in Villa Karo, we have hosted more than 40 different fields of art, ranging from dance to puppetry to writers, to architects, designers, circus artists, you name it. So every one of them discovers something of their own, and that's meaningful to them. And today we are striving to have full parity, so that half of the residents present in Villa Karo would be West Africans, and the other half would be from Finland and elsewhere. What I think where the magic happens is in the free interaction and the learning. And I think there is a sense of radical modesty about what we do, in the sense that we don't want to dictate anything. We want to be only enabling. We want to only offer the space, offer the platform, bring people together and see what happens. Instead of doing it in like a 3-day workshop where you have to now, with a certain rigid framework, create something, you actually have 6 or 8 or 10 or 12 weeks to breathe the same air, sit under the tree, come to breakfast together, have conversations that are not pressured, that are not predefined in advance of what you have to create. And that's where the best ideas arise. And that's where actually lifelong friendships are also formed, and ideas are cross-fertilized in a way that would never happen if people didn't actually make the effort of being physically elsewhere.
Together, right.
I feel very conscious about the carbon footprint of flying to the other side of the world. So what we try to do is basically put emphasis on those applicants who actually show a real openness and willingness to work with the other residents in present in Villa Karo, or to seek collaborators from outside, which we facilitate, and really to actually try to nurture the exchange, the learning, curiosity, openness, with the idea that what is created is no longer Finnish art, it's no longer Beninese art, it's a fusion of both, and it's better for that, you know, and it can actually help us to understand, to basically deeper our perspectives from both sides.
I like what you like talking about this, like just sitting under the tree and talking. We have this verb in Shishona that's kutandara, which literally means just hanging around with each other. So you can go to someone's house and just sit under a tree and talk or not talk. You don't have to talk. And I think the Caribbean has a similar, like, climbing, I heard. So you just hang out. And I think we have too little of that, because sometimes it's in the pauses as well, when we're sitting quiet together, that something happens, you know. So
yeah, but this is kind of like, I'm also circling back to the Nordic institutions, because I think there's a really huge lack of knowledge about other aesthetics than kind of like the white, Western, Eurocentric aesthetic. And like, I studied 7 years in the University of Art, and it always blows my mind that I had 1 week of Asian art traditions. 1 week. And I don't remember having any course on African anything. 1 week, the whole of Asia. That was 1 week. And then remembering that most people, like, blackness and whiteness are cultural constructs, but most people in the world are not so-called white. I'm really interested in this knowledge production, and also the role or the responsibility of institutions to create kind of like competence that artists from the Nordics can kind of like embrace, like the different traditions and heritages that are already in the region. How could African diasporic communities maintain or reimagine cultural practices in the Nordic kind of like setting? And how can institutions better support from like in this?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's something that like occupies my mind all the time, obviously, because Southnord is really young. It's started like 2023 was the official opening, but maybe from 22 we've been working behind the scenes. And when you're starting a platform like this, even though it was reactionary, you know, it was against something that happened in society, slowly I started to realize that, but this is something to build for longevity. This is something, if I'm doing it for my kids, I'm also doing it for their kids and their kids and their kids. So it's like generational, it's legacy, and there's something that needs to be left behind. And what I find with like bigger institutions, especially now when we're having this black art moment, is that there is a risk that you jump on the trend, you tick the box, and then, oh, next time Asia's hot, and like we need a Chinese artist, and then you tick that box, and then, oh, we need this. And so how do we like maintain that? So both like as a small platform, thinking long term, how can we survive? But also I see that we're not alone. There's so many, and unfortunately I have to say, because there's so many, I started to map out how many initiatives and platforms that exist in the Nordic region, focus specifically on Black and Afro-Nordic or Afro-diasporic artists and cultural workers within this region. And I got up to 40 and I just ran out of time, because I was like, I have a deadline, I have to like submit this text. So, but can you imagine 40 initiatives who have very different strategies of how can we navigate in this space where all the doors are closed, where we, you know, you try and come in, but so we need to, some of them are about promoting each other and the community around them. Some of them are about like rights, migrant artist rights, and so there's like very different like strategies and needs. And but what I think Southnord is doing, and that we are thinking of, is how can we work within the structures and institutions that already exist, because there is a lot of investment already put in there. There's a lot of capital in there, and this is taxpayers' money often, or some kind of money that has been made from operating within the society. So how can we access these spaces, these resources, and work together, not just for single events or, but long term? How do we establish relationships, long-term relationships, so that we can continue and build on, instead of destroying what we plant seeds and then we don't water them and then they die and we're like, oh, okay, well, next, so how do we tend these gardens that we are, it takes work and it takes energy, and you can't be lazy about it. So, so I'm really happy we have this collaboration with Amos Rex now, but it's also, challenging them to say so how are we going to move? Yeah, what happens after, and how are we going to move forward, and how can we think differently? Yes, it's an institution. Even at Kulturhuset, it's a big white elephant that is hard to, navigate and turn around. But you come in and you challenge, you say, could we use the whole building? The whole building? But this is an exhibition. No, but it's an art fair side. We could use your cinema, we could use your theatre, we could use your black box, we could use this. Is that how you're thinking? And all of a sudden it's possible, just because you propose it. So, and coming back to the imagination, everything we imagine, we can manifest. And so how can we use our imaginations to manifest different ways of working?
Yeah.
And challenging these set norms or perceptions of what is, and this is how we do things. We've always done things this way, and we can't possibly change it. Why not?
Yeah.
Why can't you?
What is the difference between learning and embracing, and then stealing? Because we've been also talking a lot about cultural appropriation. So what is then the difference between appropriation and appreciation? So how do we kind of navigate also this, that we want to embrace and maybe create a more polycentric, polyphonic art field where many things, many aesthetics, many traditions could coexist, but how do we do that respectfully?
So I'm going to read the first two lines of this haiku by Matsuo Basho from the late 17th century. And he starts by saying, learn about the pines from the pine and about bamboo from the bamboo. So I'm thinking that is something to ask yourself, we want to do an exhibition about blah, blah, blah. Who has that knowledge? Who has that lived experience? Who has that... who can we ask? Who are the experts on this? And then when you invite them, it's not to mind them. And this is a tricky area to be in, that we want to know everything you know about Ethiopia or about Cameroon and and this in-betweenness, and then you mine it, and then you say, thank you very much, and then
bye-bye.
But we know how to make exhibitions. We know how to take care of this. We know how to write about this. And it's no, but do you really? Because so I think it's about again, relationships and thinking long term and care, and also just being transparent and honest. We don't know a lot about this, but we're very interested in it, and you know a lot about this. We'd like to invite you in, and then when we've invited you, we give you a platform, a real platform with real money and real appreciation and real all of that, for you to be able to do your job. We were talking earlier about people being brought here to play music and getting underpaid or not getting help to get their visas, or so this non-exploitive position of always thinking, are we exploiting now? What are we gaining? We're gaining ticket sales because we have this thing that everyone wants to see. But what are we giving back to the community who is living this, or to the person who has this knowledge that we used in writing our text? Or just thinking about accountability, transparency, and giving dues where they are due.
Yeah.
Right.
And what I've experienced oftentimes, it is that it's easier to bring somebody who is not local. Hey, let's talk about racism here in Finland, but let's invite somebody from the States.
Right.
So they can talk about their racism problems and not ours. Hey, so it's somebody who is kind of further. Or let's talk about indigenous rights, but not with the local Sami people, but hey, let's bring somebody from the Amazon to discuss this. So that's also, I feel, sometimes like a huge challenge that we're facing here.
For sure. And when you bring that up, it's like I've had to explain a few times to different people, like what is so special about Southnord and the Black Nordic or the Afro-Nordic. Now, when I say Afro-Nordic, I mean African people of African descent situated here in the Nordics in different ways. So either you could be born here, you could be adopted, you could have moved here for love, education. There's so many different reasons we move here. It's different from other diasporas because a lot of other diasporas have either it's the slavery that brought them there, or it's this ex-colonial link that they moved to the land that colonized their country. So, but in the Nordics, we're here for such diverse reasons, and there's a richness in that. And I think that if we were to invite Nordic immigrants more into diversity discussions, then we would get so many points of view, because you and I, we have such different experiences and points of views, but our experiences suddenly become common because of the surrounding or the societies we live in, that we are all put in one box, and then we have to sit there and be. So yeah,
but maybe we can kind of go into this conversation by Villa Karo. So kind of so what is Villa Karo doing? What are your methodologies? Because I think it's so much kind of connected to the questions that we're talking about.
And it's something that we really see as the probably number one biggest challenge going forward. There is a sense, circling back to this point about Nordic exceptionalism, there is a sense of historical innocence for the Finns, because we didn't colonize anyone. We are innocent of the whole, we don't have post-colonial kind of baggage in our culture. And we can go to Africa and be just be free from all of that. And I think over the last 25 years of the existence of Villa Karo, there has certainly been many stumblings and exoticization of the African culture, which is only a culture of one small fishing village. Yeah. There has certainly been various misunderstandings and even disregard for how you do this cultural exchange ethically, because we shouldn't go to another continent to consume and take their culture. But like I said, still that the risks exist, but I think would be also not right to completely not to do any exchange by saying that we cannot do it in the best orthodox possible way in every sense, because every artist who goes, and people are free to travel in this world today, they have their own responsibility. As an institution, we cannot assume the responsibility on their behalf. But what we can do is to try to, before departure, we try to sensitize the people about the white privilege. And we have now a package of information and training and support around white superiority, around, like you said, cultural appropriation. What are the, to challenge people to reflect what are the silences in my art that I don't address because I don't see. What are the kind of blind spots, and what kind of knowledge does my practice contribute to? Yeah, is the knowledge that I co-create in my practice, is it ethical, or does it make assumptions that are biased? Yeah, and that's something, if we manage to get resources for, I would like to make this obligatory. Yeah. So every single person before traveling, they, at least all the white artists would have to go through this, so that we would really sensitize people before traveling. But the fact is that many people go for the first time to the African continent, and however much you try to process on the intellectual level, the reality hits you on a very physical level. And actually, I believe that we are in so many ways more influenced and shaped by experiences than by mental constructs, by intellectual engagement alone. It's the life worlds and inhabiting other life worlds that I think can really open our minds, that can really, if we do it with that spirit of curiosity and respect, mistakes happen. Mistakes must also be allowed, because otherwise we will not evolve if we are too afraid.
Right.
But if we go with that that spirit, the right attitude, and try to call out our own shortcomings, then I think, it's worth the effort.
Maybe coming back to Finnish cultural norms, I think we Finns are not great at that. Calling ourselves or each other out, or talking about when we fail.
Exactly.
I think it's
and something I would like
tricky.
to do is for us to actually intervene, and we do that.
Yeah.
When we observe these cases, but in a way that will help the person, evolve and learn, and it's a process.
And the institution as well. So basically, we're already sharing tools. Again, whoever is working in an institution or an organization, great, we can take notes and learn from each other. Thank you. So many things already came to my mind, but let's still continue. Marcia, you've shared so many amazing things about Southnord already, but would what other kind of tools or methodologies that you didn't yet kind of discuss would you like to share?
Yeah, so I touched on how we're thinking long term, and obviously that's always tied to funding and things. But we are of the attitude that we'll fake it till we make it. We have operational funding for the next 3 years, and then after that, I'm thinking that we will be self-sufficient in consulting work and all of that. But what we're doing while we have this money is to really build community, because Southnord is not stronger than the community that it's there to serve. And so we have to work with collaboration, and we try and do that both with the bigger institutions and the smaller institutions. But we're also thinking that we will be an institution, and how do you do that? That is an interesting, where you're okay, I'm going to build an institution here in the Nordics, but how do I do it so that it doesn't end up just being another institution like every institution? How can we do this differently? And I have no answer to that, but there is an ambition, every decision that we're making, can we make it in a way that's different? So we're investing in the coming generation through our Up Next open calls, where young people get a solo show, and Alex has been a curator for us last year. So both investing in young curators and young artists, and doing this systematically, because they will become the community that I'm not going to work there forever. I want to retire, so somebody needs to be prepped to take over. But we're also building up a library, a reference library, so that you can see other things, because even today in art schools, other references aren't taught as a standard. So if you want to see how do African diasporic artists work and the multitude of ways they do, come to the library and look through the books and have a chat or whatever. And we also building these residency programs, because we believe in the interaction, meeting of people. So we have our very first resident going to Lukak in Lusaka, and that was started by a Zambian artist who's based in Oslo. So also finding these pan-Nordic, pan-African collaborations, and that we together, even though we're small, think ahead and think for the future. So we working in many different ways. We have huge ambitions, but we're flexing our muscles anyway, because it's if we don't do it, who's going to do it for us? Nobody's going to come with a bag of money and say, hey, here, start a library. Hey, here, we have to make those choices. We have this money, but we're going to spend that much on buying art. We're starting a collection as well. So we have, if you come to Stockholm, We have our
do you have a space?
We have a space in Stockholm on Södermalm, and right now until mid-June we have our very first collections exhibition containing some work that we have bought from the artists that we've worked with in the first triennial and also during the smaller exhibitions that we have in our own space. And this is something that is also like giving back to the artists that we see you and your work is valuable, but not valuable in the commodity sense, right? But it's valuable in terms of art history and the canon, the Nordic canon. What is that? What does that look like? And if nobody else is collecting it, not to say that there are no institutions collecting art from Afro-Nordic artists, there are plenty. And like we were happy in our very first triennial 2 of the works that were made specifically installations for that space got bought. So in the little, we do a lot. We try and do more than we actually really physically can or should be able to do, but we do it because there's also passion and care driving more than the paycheck and more than other things.
If you had now the freedom and the resources to really actually create an institution, maybe it's Villa Karo, maybe it's Southnord, that is truly rooted in both African or Nordic or Afro-Nordic values, what could it look like? We had this conversation and you were talking about the rigidness of the projects, funding structures. Like, okay, so what could Villa Karo look like in this kind of like future where it wouldn't be about resources?
Well, like I said, we have been pretty much reinventing ourselves in the last couple of years and renewing a lot about the practices. It relates a lot to dismantling the existing power structures within the organization, which was very centralized to Helsinki, and now really decentralizing decision-making for all affairs that concern Benin, and to the Beninese staff. And having them manage their budget annually, which is jointly agreed and approved, and working as a joint management team. I'm alone at the moment here in Helsinki, so I have to work over 6,000 kilometers with my team. But I do spend my winters conveniently in Grandpopo, so that helps. But I mean, to answer your question about the rigidity of funding structures, most of my life I've worked on projects, and I've really had it. Like, it's just so silly how projects can destroy the beauty of what you want to do, because they require you to in advance define what you are going to achieve, when in fact the diamond actually often lies outside of your framework. And my vision is really an organization, like I said, that is enabling and giving freedom and professionally facilitating what the people who have been selected to come to the residency do every year. And really deeply accepting the indeterminacy of the process, the creative process. And not at the margins of, something I'm observing, but at the very core of your practice. Like curiosity to what is happening, what's coming out. Many people who come to Grandpopo, they have a work plan, like a project. But then they arrive, some of them are here today among us, and actually they discover they want to do something completely different because they have now realized what it is that they actually want to do. And I want to have that freedom. And I don't think it in any way lessens the quality of work, quite the contrary. Particularly when that happens due to the interactions, due to that openness and curiosity and the exchange and learning, because people will come there to reinvent their practice. Changing perspective forces you to actually reconsider your mannerisms, reconsider your kind of practice that you've been always doing. And that's what people come to look for. So my vision is really that kind of organization that embraces such freedom and trusts the people when they come, that they are the professionals who know what they're doing. You know, and sometimes the results of the work arise only after you go back home. A year after maybe. And you realize, actually that's what I want to be working on. And there are people who say that after 20 years, they're still today working on the same themes that they discovered back during their residency. So really opening up and funding that really trusts the artist and their process. And then,
Thank you. That was really beautiful. How about you, Marcia? What are you dreaming of if you would have the resources and then now you would have this institution that is embracing Southern Africanness, Nordicness, polycentrality? What does that look like?
If I had the goose that lays that golden egg that I can just trade for resources. No, the imagination, we spoke a little bit about it, but it's a powerful thing. It's a really powerful thing because whatever you think, you can manifest in the real world, right? And so for me, what I'm imagining, what I'm seeing in the future, maybe during my lifetime, is an Afro-Nordic cultural house, a center where we have, right now we've got like 72 square meters. We need thousands. Why? Because we have so much to do. And so we need so many things and that with like multiple of, can you imagine like having an amazing dance studio and a black box and a theater and a cinema and basically Kulturhuset, but as a resource not only for Afro-Nordics, but for the whole of the Nordics to say this is also Nordic culture. But it's a very specific and if you want to research it, if you want to access it, if you want to like learn more about it, come here. Everybody's welcome. And this is something that's very important. I think I should say that Southnord is not separatist. Everybody's welcome to Southnord. Always. Our doors open to everybody. But we are specific. Why? Because we see a need to be specific. We really see a need to take care of the things that we are doing and understand the nuances of that and then share it and say, hey, So I envision a future with this cultural center that is for truly pan-Nordic and pan-African and where we also have strengthened our ties back home to the continent of Africa so much that we have shifted the center. So it's not like, we want to engage and have that exchange, that lateral exchange. I was at the botanical gardens yesterday and they have these like 8 rooms of African plants. And I was like, why do you have so many African plants? And they were like, because we collect on these lines of longitude. Finland going down. Amazing, right? A great curatorial tool, but that is how come there are so many African plants there. And then I started to think of these plants like us, like transplanted and transported into this context and rooted now here. And what can that do? So like it's very exciting, but I think that kind of connection is so important and that it's not always, and that's why we talk about Southnord.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Julia. Thank you, Marcia. Let's give a round of applause for this conversation.
You've been listening to Dialogues for Our Futures, conversations where Swedish and Finnish voices come together to discuss shared questions and challenges. This is a podcast from Hanaholmen, the Cultural Centre for Sweden and Finland, marking its 50th anniversary. Guests today have been Julia Ojanen, Director of Cultural Institute Villa Karo in Benin, and Marcia Harvey Isaksson, a Stockholm-based artist, exhibition designer, and curator. Curious to learn more about Hanaholmen? Visit hanaholmen.fi and explore our work and listen to other podcasts in the series. My name is Ina Lindberg, and the Dialogue series is produced in collaboration with the production company Munk Studios.